Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bookworm's Book Corner, where we talk all things books. I am your host, Elizabeth Berg, and tonight we're going to be talking about a book that I picked up on a whim that I actually really enjoyed. Now, before we get started, I want to remind you that this is a spoiler free podcast, so whatever we talk about here will be spoiler free to the extent that I can. And we're also going to be able to really dig into why this book works the way it did. So, without further ado, get in your comfy clothes, grab a drink of choice, and let's get started. Now, as you can see, we're back where we were, a couple weeks ago. About a week ago, I went to visit my grandparents, and so I was in a very different location, and I'm still trying to create my podcast background. So until we have that, blank wall is back. And now, let's introduce the star of our show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about The Sundown Motel, written by Simone St. James. I picked this book off of Amazon. I'm a fan of Stranger Things, and so I don't want to say this was connected to Stranger Things. It was more along the lines of, if you know Stranger Things, it takes place in the 80s, and this was one of the recommended books that they had online. It was like, if you're a fan of Stranger Things, read this book. So I put it in my cart on a whim. Now, as you know how our podcast works, I talk about the pages, how long it is, my pros and cons. I read the back of the book, and then I tell you my thoughts. So, this book, let me check my notes, is 326 pages long, and it took me about a day to read. It wasn't too difficult of a read. This book is interesting because it varies in perspectives. So, you have two, I want to say, main characters that have two different perspectives and points of view of what's going on and when it's happening. So, this is the cover, as you can see. So, I honestly kind of liked the cover. It was no nonsense. It was very simple, very basic. Um, I really liked it. It's not too flashy, and I thought it looked interesting to me. I like the old fashioned, oops, there it is. The sign on the book. I like how it looked. The back has some reviews, of course, and it has a pretty catchy like hook on the back, which I'm going to read in a minute. The chapters aren't too bad. Like I said before in previous podcasts, sometimes it's a little difficult to read certain books because it can get very wordy. This book wasn't too wordy. You do have to pay attention to the chapters though, because as I mentioned previously, this book has two perspectives, and so it has two different timelines. So it's interesting how they interconnect, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So, let me read you the back. The first thing it says is compelling and creepy from Pop Sugar. That one definitely, it got my attention when I looked at the back. I like the deliciously creepy and chilling from Riley Sager from Home Before Dark. I like the reviews because it made me really wonder, is this something I'm going to want to read? The will send shivers down your spine, or taut and twisty, an entertaining thriller from the Minneapolis Star Tribune. I was really interested in this book, and so I picked it up, and then next thing I know, it was done, and I was just like, oh my goodness. So let's read the back. Something hasn't been right at the roadside Sundown Motel for a very long time, and Carly Kirk is about to find out why in this chilling New York Times best-selling novel from the author of The Broken Girls. Upstate New York, 1982. Viv Delaney wants to move to New York City and help pay for it as she takes a job as the night clerk at the Sundown Motel in Fell, New York. But something isn't right at the motel, something haunting and scary. Upstate New York, 2017. Carly Kirk has never been able to let go of the story her Aunt Viv, who mysteriously disappeared from the Sundown Motel before she was born. Carly decides to move to Fell and visit the motel, where she quickly learns that nothing has changed since 1982. And soon she finds herself ensnared in the same mysteries that claimed her aunt. Oh boy. So the first thing I want to say, as like I said, I have my little notebook here where I talk, like, write down my thoughts. So the first thing I want to say is this book is definitely a thriller. It is a murder mystery. There is suspense, and there are some supernatural aspects. And so I don't like giving away spoilers like this, but for those who are not interested in supernatural aspects, there are some in this book that really weaves itself into the plot line. And so you need to understand that this book is not realistic fiction. This book isn't something that could genuinely happen. So when I read 14 Ways to Die, how that honestly, I don't want to say, God forbid, that could happen, but it takes place in the real world and with realistic, creepy things that could happen with social media. Now, this book, I wasn't sure what to expect. Um, Sometimes I really don't like having the varying perspectives because sometimes it's a bit too much. And coming from someone that was on Wattpad for a very long time as a teen and always looking for the next big thing, sometimes it didn't work out. And so I was a little nervous when I read that, but I'm really glad I stuck through and read it because this book definitely was not what I was anticipating. So the two perspectives are from Viv Delaney, the person who disappeared, the aunt, and then Carly Kirk, who is the girl in present time. So Viv's the pers- blah, 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 blah. It's Friday, folks. Oh boy. From Viv's perspective, she's trying to figure out what's going on with the motel. So there is a mystery that Viv is trying to solve. And in the midst of her trying to solve it in 1982, she up and disappears. And Carly's family doesn't talk about her. They don't, it's like the whole, we don't talk about, like this, we don't talk about that. They refuse to talk about her. And so when Carly's mother passes away, she's like, okay, I need to figure out this mystery once and for all. Now, Carly, her plot line is basically trying to figure out what happened to Viv. And it gets to a point in the story where these plots begin to intersect, which is why I kind of liked the whole dual perspective piece because, you know, it's there. It worked. Like I said, sometimes it doesn't, and thankfully for this book, it definitely did. Um, there is a couple things in this book that can be difficult to read. So there is, content warning. Obviously, there's death, murder, but there's also, assaults of different kinds. And it can be tricky to comprehend what's going on at certain points because, like I said, something's happening in 1982 and Viv's trying to figure it out. But at the same time, Carly, who's trying to figure out what happened to her aunt, is also trying to figure out what that mystery was herself. And so you're wrapped up in this murder mystery thriller where you're trying to figure out what's going on and why it's happening. I'm not going to say it turns into a thriller at the end of the book, but the ending of the book definitely did shock me. Um, I was sitting in bed reading the other night, and my fiance was like, "Woman, what's wrong?" And I'm sitting there like, "No, no," and I was just bombarded with emotions and feelings. Now, I will say this about the book. What I kind of also really liked about it is it's very, um, I like how, and this is going to make a sense for the like page when they like who it's for the odd girls, the nerdy girls, and the murderinos, this one is yours. It's just I really like how the author created a book where you have this character who isn't, she's normal. There's nothing, abnormal about her. She wears glasses, she's a big bookworm, and she likes true crime. And coming from someone that wears glasses, likes true crime, and reads a lot, I was just like, oh my gosh. So it was when I was in college and we had to do the whole text to self, windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, where you want to see yourself as the character, look into the other character's life, and then the sliding glass door where you can look through it, also like go in. You have that as well, and it was as someone who's able to like connect with Carly, not being able to fit in somewhere and then finding a place that really fits in. Um, it's kind of cool to see. So I really like that as well. I consider that a pro. It also doesn't help that the side character, his name is Nick. He not a bad looking guy either. There is, I don't want to say there's romance, there's no spice. So I will say this isn't focusing on spice. So for those who are new to the book reading world, spice is, intimate scenes and like dirty talking. There wasn't really any of that. There was none of that at all, actually. It was this 20-year-old girl woman, excuse me, who's like, ooh, he's not unattractive, and I might have a crush on this guy in like room 210, but that's fine. And they work together to solve the mystery. So it has a little bit of everything for everyone, which I also really liked. I didn't really have any cons for this book, which also really surprised me. This book isn't perfect. I will say that. It's not perfect. There were some scenes where I was just like, this is going really slow. But at the same time, I didn't really have any cons with this book. I was very happy with it. So I definitely recommend reading The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I'm going to show the cover one more time. You can find this book on Amazon. I haven't found it in Barnes and Noble. That doesn't mean it's not there. Um, but like I said before, I bought it on Amazon on a whim, and 10 out of 10, I would recommend reading this book. So, speaking about books, if you have a book you are interested in having me read, please put it down in the comments below. I'm always open to finding new books to read. I'm currently in the middle of reading our next possible podcast. I sometimes read a couple books at a time, and it drove my Nana bonkers because honestly, how can I do that? I have no clue. Um, but in all seriousness, though, if you have a recommendation you're interested in, definitely put it down in the comments below. Uh, Let me know what you think about this book because I truly, I really liked it. I really did, and I want to know what other people think about this book as well. All right, everyone, have a good evening, have a good weekend, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye, everybody.